Most of today's program and all of this monologue is going to be about President Donald Trump's national security strategy, which I believe is a realism-based strategy. What is in America's best interest? What can he do to advance it? How does he advance it within the envelope of not creating excessive risk for the American military and the American people? He's got a great group of advisors. He obviously trusts his vice president. He obviously trusts Secretary of State Rubio. He obviously trusts Secretary of War, I'm not used to saying it yet, Hegseth, and the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, Kane. That's the core group. All right, that's the core group. And he's got a great UN ambassador in Michael Waltz to project his policy pronouncements out to the world. What do I think is happening? Well, I think he's assessing how does he hurt the mullahs? How does he hurt the regime such that it collapses? And yesterday's big development is he kind of walked back his talk of the last week. A week ago, he was on this program and said, if the Iranians kill their people, we're going to get involved. And he doubled down on that with Sean Hannity, and he said on True Social, help is on the way and make Iran great again. And he talked about it with Tony DeGopel. And then yesterday he said, we've been told the killings have stopped and there won't be execution. So a lot of Trump critics want to accuse him of being feckless and erratic. I want to say, wait a minute. What else happened yesterday? He turned the Lincoln Strike Group left. It is in the South China Sea. It's a lot of firepower. It's an aircraft carrier with the full wing. It's got a bunch of destroyers. It's got submarines. It's got all sorts of eyes in the sky sort of stuff as well. And it's going to take, I think, 10 days to get to the Middle East. Why does that matter? Because I fully expect if we hit Iran, they're going to unload on our airbase at Qatar and on our allies or wherever there are American air bases or American service people in Iraq, and especially on our ally Israel. And if they do that, their ballistic missile arsenal is full. Their nuclear program's been obliterated by President Trump. If they do that, we need more firepower in the Gulf. Now, we sent a lot of the firepower that we had in the Gulf down to the Caribbean because we had to take out Maduro and did. That's a very good thing. I talked about the reality-based foreign policy of Donald Trump on America's Newsroom this morning with Dana Perino. Here is that clip.
And joining us now is Fox News contributor and radio host Hugh Hewitt. I don't think that they really felt like they got what they were looking for from the Danish side. Listen to the Danish foreign minister on special report last night.
We will now set up this high-level working group to explore whether there is a way forward where we can accommodate, which I totally agree, the president's concern and still respect, of course, the territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark and the Greenlandic people's right to self-determination.
So, in a way, we're just at the beginning of these conversations, and President Trump came out hot, they came out hot. Do you think that there ultimately will be a deal?
I do, Dana,
I do too.
and good morning. The United States began talking about Greenland the first Trump term, and it's because it's an enormous island, right? It's 3 times the size of Texas. It's got 27,000 miles of shoreline. And the key here is there is an exclusive economic zone around each of those 27,000 miles that extends out 230 miles. That means whoever has sovereignty over Greenland gets to control the 230 miles adjacent to it in the ocean. China is a problem on a number of fronts. They have hypersonic missiles, and they have an enormous fishing fleet. And wherever their enormous fishing fleet go, they overfish, they break the rules, they destroy the environment. So excluding the Chinese fishing fleet is something Denmark cannot do. They only have 20 ships. They're a good ally. They sent 18,000 troops to Afghanistan during the long war. They're a good member of NATO, but they're 6 million people. They're not equipped to defend Greenland. There are only 60,000 people on Greenland. Only 7.5% of them are Danes. The rest are native Inuits. And the fact is, we need it for Space Force because of hypersonic missiles. We need it for Golden Dome. And we need it for the exclusive economic zone to keep the Chinese out. So the president's very serious. I know Denmark has got its back up a little bit because he's talked bluntly. But I'd rather have the blunt conversation about the realities of national security than not talk about it and pretend like Denmark is up to the challenge of excluding the Chinese fishing fleet. or dealing with hypersonic missiles.
Hugh, I just want to show everybody. I want to get to Venezuela, but can you pull up the map here? This is a map of the Arctic Circle, and it shows military posts of China, Russia, the U.S., and Europe. And to me, this helps visualize what the president is talking about.
I agree, Dana, because the hypersonic missile threat, they'll come over the pole. And that means we need our forward defense built and deployed on Greenland and on every forward-facing part of the Western Hemisphere if we're going to deter that kind of thing. Long range. We're not talking decades here. The Chinese think in terms of centuries, the Russians in generations. Americans used to think in terms of decades. I think President Trump is thinking in terms of centuries, and he's thinking as a realist. And the Danes just have to figure it out. There's 6 million people. They're good friends. We love going to Copenhagen. We can be buddies. But the realities of the world are that China is a predatory power with a predatory fishing fleet and hypersonic missiles. That's the reality. And I praise Donald Trump for dealing with the reality. And I'm sorry that the Danes are upset. But the reality of the world is Greenland ought to be under American sovereignty.
In addition, the Danes and the rest of Europe are getting closer to China on the tech side of things and then trying to tax our companies and regulate them out of existence. One last quick question for you. President Trump will host the Venezuelan opposition leader, Machado, today at the White House. He spoke to Delcy Rodriguez, the current leader of Venezuela. I was going to say Colombia. Venezuela. What are you looking for out of this meeting today?
Regime evolution. We're not into regime change. It's not Iran where we want regime collapse. We want regime evolution so that the people who replaced Maduro, they're bad people too, but they're being nicer now. They're releasing political prisoners. We want to move towards bringing Machado back and allowing the people of Venezuela to have a free and fair and frequent elections. It's a good step forward for the president to be meeting with Ms. Machado, the Nobel Prize laureate.
Hugh Hewitt, always a pleasure to have you on.
So that we covered Greenland and we covered Venezuela, and we didn't cover Iran because they had other people to do Iran. But there's a coherent national security policy coming from the Oval Office for the first time since President Trump left. The Biden years were incoherent. Secretary Biden, National Security Advisor Sullivan, they were in a different world. And that was the world that was built by Barack Obama for 8 years and John Kerry and Ben Rhodes. And it was silly. It was based on the fantasy that everybody is nice at heart and nobody wants to mow down civilians. Well, guess what? The mullahs mowed down thousands of people in the last week. I mean, they just opened fire on civilians marching in the street. If you can imagine any of our great marches in the past, Civil Rights March of 1963, or the March for Our Lives by the students from Parkland afterwards, just imagine a regime setting up machine guns and mowing down those people. That's what they did over the last week. Not surprisingly, they're not in the streets last night, at least by anything we have seen. We don't have a lot of visibility. They're still off the internet. But Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, was on Newsmax last night, and he said, we're watching them, the mullahs, the regime, the IRGC, move all of their money out. They are taking their hard currency out. They're getting out of that because they're afraid their regime cannot stand up. Because the reality, even if the marches have stopped for a while, is Donald Trump put his credibility on the line. Doesn't mean he has to act today or this weekend or next week or even next month. I think the window's much larger than that. You got to get your ducks in order. He's got Chairman Kaine. If Chairman Kaine says to him, we can get Maduro, and we're going to practice getting Maduro, and we set up Maduro's compound, and we practice, and we have this weather window, and the chairman says go, and the Secretary of War says go, then the president says go and gives the order. So now he wants options about Iran. He wants them to be absolutely devastating options, but not long range. He wants to help dissolve the regime, but he's not about replacing the regime. He's about regime collapse and then see who comes out on top. He's not thrown in with the Crown Prince Pahlavi. He told me that last week. He didn't think it was appropriate for him to try and pick a winner. But if he can help collapse it, great. He's also a realist, and he knows that carrier strike group has within it a lot of capacity to intercept ballistic missiles and destroy them in the sky, as they did in concert with the Israeli Defense Forces last June. So if we're getting ready to get into a hot war, even a short one, with Iran that sends a message, don't kill your civilians, you want more assets in place. That's the Lincoln carrier and the Lincoln strike group that goes along with the carrier. You want to give the Israelis enough time, and you want to let our Arab ally. Everything else, smoke and mirrors. Don't tell me he's bait and switched and let down the Iranian people. We don't know that. We won't know that until we can look backwards from a period of time certain, couple of months down the road minimum, to say whether or not Donald Trump talked out of the top of his hat or whether or not he was just being crafty Donald Trump again. More coming up. Noah Rothman. This hour, I'm going to talk with Eliana Johnson. I got a great group of guests, Michael Knowles, Alex Gray. In the second hour, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Seth Mandel, Jim Garrity in hour number 3. There's a lot ahead, a lot focused on Iran on today's Hugh Hewitt Show. Joined by Noah C. Rothman, senior editor at National Review. Noah, nothing happened in Iran, at least nothing that the United States wanted to make visible happen in Iran last night. The marchers have been cowed. Thousands have been murdered by a ruthless regime. Thousands more imprisoned. No public executions. One that was scheduled did not come off. What do you think is happening? I have my own view, but let's hear yours first.
Well, it's very difficult to get information out of the Islamic Republic, has been for several days. And there are disturbing reports that are completely understandable, that the robust protest movement has been relatively dispirited. I don't know if I would say cowed, but certainly intimidated. Many of them are licking their wounds. Many of them have lost family and friends and are mourning them and are not allowed to do so publicly. And it's very dispiriting from my perspective. This is revolutions like these, and this is an uprising akin to a revolution, need momentum. And when momentum stalls, it can stall out permanently. We saw this after 2009. We saw something like it after 2022. We do need to keep up the momentum, and that's why the president and Republicans in Congress were right to say help is on the way, keep up the pressure. But it's incumbent on us to provide that assistance, and to provide that assistance in a timely fashion. I understand what you were saying in the previous segment. I share a lot of your concerns and willingness to suspend disbelief, not necessarily indict the administration just yet for its tardiness in meeting its own self-set goals. But there's a reason why we're not acting as rapidly as we are, and that's because the carriers are not in the Gulf as they should be. We have 11 carrier groups.
And Noah, I've got a son-in-law in carriers. I know a little bit about carriers. Yeah. We only have 4 at sea at any time. They can't be everywhere. And the South China Sea was the direct threat, and we took Maduro out with the other carrier group. Takes 10 days to get there. The revolution started 7 days ago. So I'm not sure you can say they're not there and they should be.
Well, you can say that, and we've had a lot of conversations about the Maduro raid. I think the Caracas raid was a tactical and strategic success, absolutely necessary, incumbent on us to remove this node of control that Iran, China, Russia, and to a lesser extent Cuba have used to project power and frustrate American objectives in the Western Hemisphere. But if those deployments prevented us from taking maximum advantage of this historic opportunity to defeat the most malignant regime on the planet Earth, the foremost projector of terrorism across the planet Earth, a regime that absorbs a lot of our resources, a lot of our time, a lot of our attention, and it makes Americans less safe, posterity will regard that mission, I believe, as a flight of fancy, as something that precluded us from pursuing national grand strategic objectives that were of objectively more importance.
I think we agree on this. I think we agree that it would be wonderful if the regime collapsed, and I cannot wait to see what we do over the course of 2 months. But I don't. There was a conversation on the Commentary podcast today, and you listen to it every day, and I do. John was being the realist this morning, John Podhoretz, saying, I don't want to say the president tricked them into going into the streets, because they actually aren't receiving any of our messages. They're blacked out. Those protests were organic. And when the president said MIGA and help is on the way, and when he told me that they can't keep killing their people, I do think he set the table for people to rely on that and for Israel to get ready to rely on that. But I don't think the Iranian people were marching because of that. I think they were marching because the rial went to zero, and it's not going to go back up either. I'm willing to give the president a couple of months to do something. I'm not sure he wants it. We're in the regime change business, but the regime iteration business, I'm all for that. And I'm also
I just think months is too long. If we're talking about 20,000 casualties in the space of a week, it's too long. There will be no revolution in a month.
Okay, I'm not that confident about what we know and don't know, and I'm not thinking revolution. I'm thinking about what happened. What's in America's national interest that they not have ballistic missiles? We now know it was in our national interest, given the brutality the regime unveiled. We now know for sure that what Operation Midnight Hammer achieved ought to have been done decades ago. And we now know, because they're crazy. There's a crazy regime full of just the evilest people in the world. I make up a word there. And we are very justified in doing whatever we can. And Israel is justified in taking out the missile threat. And help is on the way, suggests help is on the way. But I think 2 months is a realistic time frame. I mean,
maybe.
We won't know until we can look back, right?
Oh, true, exactly right. I am speculating about posterity, but I'm speculating with, I believe, some education behind it. I think you're right that the carrier group's position is not necessarily about offensive firepower, but defensive firepower.
Correct.
Which is absolutely critical for the defense of our allies and our neighbors. And we could use long-range assets like we used in Operation Midnight Hammer to execute these strikes, although that's really heavy weaponry, and it's not the sort of thing that I think we need to achieve here. We do have destroyers in the region. We have allied air bases and firepower that we could use to execute small-scale symbolic strikes on targets that would select, for example, IRGC targets, besieged targets, these institutions that are responsible for executing these attacks on civilians, and probably the regime's most reliable institutions for regime survival. But you could also hit ballistic missile sites, ballistic missile production sites, even regime value targets like oil production, oil refineries, and what have you.
That's what I want. Karg Island. I don't know why, and I'm going to ask Michael Duran, who's an actual Iran expert, next week. Why is Karg Island still pumping out oil? It's not helping the Iranian people. It enriches the IRGC. It helps China. Why is it still there? And the missile production facilities. But what I want to come back around to, Noah, is impatience with President Trump. I hear it on the Republican side among people who call themselves neocons. I'm not. I'm a Reagan conservative. I'm a Nixon realist, and I think he's doing fine, and we can't judge yet. I do think he set the table for the world to rely on him doing something, and that he will be scorned if he doesn't. I think that's the reality. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely do, but I just think that we have to emphasize the time frame, which I just think is far shorter than months, even weeks. I think the clock is ticking. I think the regime has demonstrated that it has no regard for its legitimacy, that it will kill its way to survival, because the regime and the clerisy believe that if the regime collapses, they will draw their last breaths. The stakes are higher for them than they are for us, and higher for the protesters than they are for us. And I just think we're flittering away time that is of the essence. And we could end up acting in several weeks' time, but there won't be a real revolution in the streets.
If people listened to Haviv Reddy Gur yesterday, his Ask Haviv Anything podcast, he emphasized the durability of this maniacal regime. We have to be very sober-minded about what can and cannot be done. And I don't want to encourage people to go out and demonstrate on the assumption that we're about ready to send in the 101st Airborne and the 82nd. That's not realistic, is it, Noah?
No, I don't think so either. No, I don't think this administration envisions a presence on the ground, but that's part of the self-limiting thing about this. I don't necessarily want boots on the ground either. I don't think that would be effective or would achieve the objectives we want to achieve. But the notion here that you can collapse a regime from the air lacks a lot of supporting evidence, or really any supporting evidence. You need support on the ground. If you want to pursue a Libya-style operation here, which seems like what the president is envisioning, you need the support of activists on the ground, armed activists who are demonstrating against the government and are demonstrating in ways that can seize the institutions and the means of power. That is available today on the ground in Iran. I don't think it'll be there in 2-3 weeks' time.
Okay, I haven't seen any evidence of arms yet. That's where the Second Amendment was needed in Iran. Noah C. Rothman of National Review, thank you. I want to tell you that coming up, Shelley Moore Capito is going to talk with me about the appropriations bills and where are we. I do know President Trump is trying to bring down the cost of health care, and that includes reining in Big Pharma. And Big Pharma is not easily reined in. We have a great client, a great sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Conservatives for Lower Healthcare Costs. And Conservatives for Lower Healthcare Costs have a website, pharmawindfall.com. So in this midterm election year, it's pivotal, 2026, going to be a big issue about drug prices. And Big Pharma and its army of lobbyists are working overtime to block real solutions They want to push heavy-handed government intervention in the private healthcare market, all to protect their profits. But we have polling from John McLaughlin, right? Good pollster, confirms that 73% of voters blame Big Pharma for high prescription prices. 85% are concerned that pharma-backed government intervention would increase costs, and 8 out of 10 voters believe Big Pharma is pushing these proposals. President Trump isn't intimidated by Big Pharma. I'm not intimidated by Big Pharma. They won during the Obamacare years. That's why we're all screwed up. That's why drugs cost so much. They don't need to win again. Conservatives for Lower health care costs is representing you, but you got to help them by going to their website right now, pharmawindfall.com, pharmawindfall.com. Coming up after the break, I'm going to talk with Eliana Johnson, who is the editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon. More about Iran, because Eliana is on the Commentary podcast today. And the Commentary podcast today was just about Iran. I talked about Venezuela and Greenland with Dana Perino earlier today, but I'm focused on Iran because to the extent that we can see, nothing happened on the streets of Iran last night. There are no new videos that I could find of demonstrations, and I'm not surprised. They mowed down somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people. The regime is admitting to it. And if you watch Bret Baier last night talk to the foreign minister was Baghdad Bob reincarnate. And Bret just held his feet to the fire, and he ended up blaming the Jews, blamed Israel. It was the craziest 10 minutes of television I've seen in a long time. And maybe we'll get to it. But I want to emphasize for you, President Trump's got a coherent foreign policy. It's based on America's national security interests. Don't kill Americans. Don't threaten Americans. Don't send drugs into the country. Don't send illegals into the country. Don't even think about it. Right? That's the Trump foreign policy. And he's got a very strong set of senior advisors that include Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Raisin Kane, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, Ambassador Waltz at the UN, and Vice President Vance. And there are other people as well. Susie Wiles is in that room. There are a lot of people in that room talking about options. When the president says help is on the way, I believe him. I also believe that's why the Lincoln Strike Group, Abraham Lincoln is a carrier, and we've got 11 of those, and there are only 3 or 4 at sea at any given time, and there wasn't one in the Middle East after they had both been forward deployed there for a long period of time, last June through July, and carriers got to go home, right? They're usually a 6-month tour, then they got to go home and refill and redo and re-up, and especially fuel. And so when the Lincoln turned left yesterday, or at least we were told they might have turned left 3 days ago, we don't know. I don't know. Someone might know. Someone who follows carriers would know better than I do, but I don't know. When they made the left-hand turn, that told me that we're getting ready for second-order impacts of a strike on Iran. The second-order impacts of a strike on Iran would probably include a fusillade of missiles at Israel. And we need to be able to protect our ally. They can do a lot themselves because, Arrow system, David Sling system, Iron Dome, but it helps if we have our Aegis system there as well, and we're sending help. Help is on the way, but it's not there yet. Keep your eyes. Make no judgment. Keep your eyes. You can make a judgment about relief factor. It works. Took on the implacable hill this morning. Did my hit with Dana, which I played in the first segment, and Bill Hemmer on America's Newsroom, and then went and got my relief factor. And here's the great thing. It works. I carry it in curcumin, resveratrol, omega, and I take it on the Salem News Channel every day. You know what? It works because it works because it works. And I've been taking it for 13 years. And I take it every day on the air. When you first get your starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day, by calling 1-800-4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or you go to their website, you take 3 of those packets a day for a week, then 2 of those packets a day for a week, and in the 3rd week you're down to 1 packet, and then you'll see if it works for you. And if it works for you, you're going to want to reorder because you want to keep those levels of Icarian, curcumin, and resveratrol omega up in your body and feeling good for your exercise. Joined now by Eliana Y. Johnson, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon, contributor to the Commentary podcast, longtime friend of the program. Eliana, you and the Commentary gang were in my ears. I went up the implacable hill that I try and go up every morning this morning, and I kept waiting for one of you to use the word realism. I know you studied national security realism at Yale. You had like Charles, whatever his last name is, the original realist.
Yeah.
So why didn't anyone say he's just a realist about when and how we can get stuff done in Iran, and it's too soon to tell what we've done?
Hugh, I'm sympathetic to your point here. I think, the point I made in less articulate terms was that I think it's wrong. I think it's totally wrong to call Trump an isolationist. I think his opposition to neoconservatism has been confused with isolationism wrongly. And I think Trump has absolutely no problem with the projection of American power, as we've seen both in his first administration and in this administration. I'm also sympathetic to the points you've made about his posture on Iran here, where the situation is complicated and it's going to take time to figure out where this is all going to land. I think if we zoom out for a second, it's important to note that Iran's aspirations to be a regional superpower are over. And that is thanks in part to the actions of President Trump and Israel and his support for Israel. And he deserves credit for driving the situation to this point through Operation Midnight Hammer and his support for Israel's campaigns to decapitate Iran's regional proxies.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think, Eliana. And I thought I heard impatience, especially from Christine and Abe. John was, and you were being very realist. Seth was being very realist. But who was your national security professor at Yale? What was his name?
His name was Professor Charles Hill. He passed away a few years ago, but he was a speechwriter for Henry Kissinger, and then he was the executive aide to George Shultz when he was Secretary of State in the Reagan administration, and he was famous for his note-taking. He didn't say much during his government service, but he took legions of notes, and he was an incredible listener. I recommend to your listeners a book about him by Molly Worthen, who was a fellow student of mine at Yale and was one of his students, called The Man on Whom Nothing Was Lost.
Oh, that's fabulous. I didn't know about The Man Upon Whom Nothing Was Lost. He was, like Kissinger and like Nixon, an uber realist, which is, what are America's national interests? How do we defend them? How do we do it at minimum cost? Nixon used to say no more Vietnams. I think everyone's going to say no more Iraqs. But what we do know now, based on the ruthlessness of this regime over the last week, good thing they don't have nukes or are close to nukes, because they'd use them. Now we have to start thinking about their ballistic missiles, and we have to start thinking about the fact that if we hit them, we want the Lincoln Carrier Strike Group there to help Israel defend while Israel methodically reduces the missile capacity like they did in June during the 12-day war. I just thought Christine and Abe were perhaps a little judgmental. The president has gone out on a limb. He said, help is on the way. MIGA, he said all those. He said them on the show last week. He's led people to believe he's going to do something, but the time frame, I just think we've got to be, I might say on March 15th, St. Patrick's Day, I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump, but not yet. Am I being too forgiving?
No, look, I'm with you on this, but I think you can argue it both ways. He did seemingly draw a red line, but it wasn't clear what he was going to do. He said if they continue to mow down protesters, we are going to act. We won't allow it to happen. And he said help is on the way. I would note, Hugh, you noted that the USS Lincoln is being relocated from the South China Sea to the Middle East. One important piece of information that we learned today is that Israel has pressed the United States. This is reporting in the New York Times and Axios. Who knows how accurate that is, but that Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with both the president and the vice president yesterday, reportedly, and asked them to wait on any military action. I think that's an important piece of information.
Oh,
and also
yes.
that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced sanctions, a fresh round of sanctions through the Office of Foreign Assets Control, designating 18 people who oversee the country's security forces in the law enforcement forces in Iran and the IRGC, including Ali Laranjani, the Secretary of the Supreme Council of National Security there, the guy who went on Bret Baier and was talking tough. And that is intended to inflict further economic damage on the regime. So both of those pieces of information suggest to me that we're in the middle of something, not at the end of something. Look, we could be wrong, but I think it's complicated, and I'm sympathetic to where Trump is on them. I think the regime has been humiliated. It's broke. It's isolated. It's been humiliated militarily, economically. And Trump is trying to be judicious in the action that he does take. If he acts, I think he wants it to be decisive. And that's hard.
Yeah.
Hard to figure out how to do that.
I'm going to phrase it. I think we're at the end of the beginning. We're not in the middle yet because it takes carrier groups 10 days to 3 weeks to get where they're going to go. So the end of the beginning. I also wanted to raise, if Raising Cane comes back to him, I think he relies on the Vice President, Secretary Hegseth, Rubio, Michael Waltz to a lesser extent, and Raising Cane. And if they come to him and say, we need 3 or 4 weeks, but if Netanyahu says, we need a month, they're going to give him a month, right? Because they're in the ballistic missile path. That's the trajectory. They hit Israel more than they hit us. Well, I want a quick question. Do you think we should blow up Karg Island? I don't know that oil helps the Iranian people at all. It only helps China. Why isn't that on the target list?
I have to say, Hugh, I'm not in the weeds enough to be able to say we should hit this target or that target. You're asking the wrong person there. I would be pretending to expertise that I don't have. I will leave that to Raising Cane. But I did think that the piece of information that Bibi leaned on the president and asked him to wait was important because it is Bibi who identified the ballistic missiles, not just the nuclear program, as an existential threat to Israel a couple of months ago when Israel and the U.S. went after the nuclear program.
And if they are reloading the Arrow capacity, if they're reloading David's sling, and there are some reports I've read in the Israeli English language press that that's not quite reloaded yet, that would doubly make your point. Eliana Y. Johnson, good to hear you on the Commentary Podcast. Everyone should be reading the Washington Free Beacon. We'll talk to you again soon. I want you to remember that tomorrow is the Hillsdale Dialogue for Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu. That's hillsdale.edu. If you want all the Hugh for Hillsdale podcasts, you go to hughforhillsdale.com. There are hundreds of them. And I'm on news stations all over the country, and you don't know that we've got, I think, 800 hours of conversations with Dr. Arnn and other members of the Hillsdale faculty on subjects that range from Homer to Shakespeare to last week and everything in between. And you'll love them. It's great listening. If you're ever looking for a podcast series on any particular subject from the ancient world or the modern world or anything having to do with theory, or you just want to know what Dr. Arnn, who has raised a generation of conservative leaders, and I mean solid, grounded people, then you want to go to hillsdale.edu and find the button for the Hillsdale Dialogue, or simply remember hughforhillsdale.com. That is a tradition now going on into a second decade, I believe, and will continue. We're in Winston Churchill's World War II memoirs. So if you're getting ready for tomorrow, I didn't bring the book with me today. It's still at home. The Churchill book that we're in right now is The Gathering Storm, and I do want to play for you a little bit of Bret Baier with the Iranian foreign minister last night. Such an extraordinary conversation. Here we are.
And we've seen the video of body bags stacking up. You were saying that all of this is because you're not in control of your country and foreign elements are killing people inside your country?
No, I'm telling you that it was a fighting between our security forces and terrorist elements who had a plan to create a big number of killings in order to provoke President Trump to enter into this conflict and start a new war against Iran. And that was exactly an Israeli plot. The footages that you mentioned have not been seen in Iran. I have to tell you that a misinformation campaign is going on at the same time.
And you're suggesting that it's Israel and Mossad acting like Iranian forces, shooting the Iranian people to make casualties to spur on the action of President Trump. I'm just saying there's a lot of people that don't believe that, Mr. Foreign Minister.
No, Mossad has already confessed that.
They may be on the ground, sir, but as far as them killing hundreds and hundreds of people to make it look like you did, it does not appear in the video that we get out that this is a full level of calm. It appears that protests continue in a number of different cities.
Bravo, Brett. I watched that and I said, this guy's a lunatic. But then again, I realized they're all lunatics. They've been lunatics since 1979. Khomeini was a fanatic. Khamenei is a fanatic. The IRGC is run by fanatics. They only let people go on TV when they want to say incredibly. Mossad is on the ground killing Iranians in order to bring Donald Trump into a war that Iran already lost. All right. That makes no sense at all, but it can't make sense of it. They've murdered thousands of their own citizens in the course of 2 weeks. Began on December 28th. It's now January 15th. In the course of 2.5 weeks. They've murdered thousands of their own citizens. What won't they do? The answer is nothing. That's why it was good that President Trump obliterated their nuclear program. Pleased to welcome Michael Knowles, who you know from the Daily Wire podcast that his name is on. Michael, welcome. I want everyone to go to the Michael Knowles podcast. I want to know, though, at the top, I just had Eliana Johnson on. She's a Yaley like you. She took Charles Hill. Did you take Charles Hill when you were at Yale?
But of course I did. Hugh, there were only about 2.5 Republican conservative professors at Yale, and Charles Hill, truly a great man of blessed memory. I think now there are negative 2.5 Republican professors at Yale, so ave atque vale, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did, because that means you had an uber realist foreign policy national security professor like Eliana. As an uber realist myself, I want to know what Michael Knowles thinks about what Donald Trump has said to me, to Sean Hannity, to Tony Dokoupil on X, posted on Truth Social about Iran. What do you think is going on? Did he bait and switch, or are we at the end of the beginning, or at the end of the end? What do you think is going on?
You know, President Trump's realism is something that I think has confounded a lot of even his supporters because of this phrase, America first, which some people, especially very ideological people, took to mean that Trump would only focus on the home front. But that obviously isn't what he did. I mean, even going back to the first term, he drops the Moab. Speaking of Iran, he kills Soleimani. All the way up to recent events in Venezuela. So obviously what he wants is to project American strength around the world. And I think what he wants to do is just do it in a cheap way. So, maybe Venezuela is the best way to look at this. President Trump carried out the Biden-Harris policy, which was the policy going all the way back to the Bush administration, which was that the Chavez and then Maduro regimes were unacceptable. So we want to get rid of these guys. He did it in a way that Biden couldn't do it, and he did it by saving $25 million along the way. I think that's what you're seeing play out with Iran. I'm not the first person to observe he is trying to be unpredictable. I think that's a feature, not a bug, of his foreign policy. However, it is very telling. I thought that H.A. Hazony on Twitter, one of Yoram Hazony's sons, made a great point about this, which is, there are many people who are hoping for the toppling of the regime in Iran. It is far from clear, though, what will happen after that occurs, and whether or not that would actually be good for Israel, whether or not that would actually be good for the United States. And so, obviously, Trump's policy has been one of maximum pressure. What comes next, remains to be seen.
See, I'm agreement with you. I'm just not ready to condemn the president for bait and switch, because I think it takes time to set up. Like, it took 2 months to get ready to grab Maduro. It's going to take some time to help us on the way to Iran. Doesn't have a date stamp on it. And if Eliana Johnson is correct, and sources in Israel are saying Prime Minister Netanyahu asked the president to delay, I believe that General Kane probably said, we're not ready yet. Let's get the link in there. And so I just think we're at the beginning of Iran Part 2. Let me talk to you about Greenland, because I was on Fox News this morning with Dana Perino, and they asked me about Greenland. And my point of view, I know you did your podcast about it today, but I haven't heard it yet. I've been in my own studio. My point of view is it's 3 times the size of Texas. It's got 60,000 people on it. 95% of whom are Inuit natives, and 5% or 7% of whom are Danes. Denmark is fine. They're a lovely ally. They sent 18,000 troops to Afghanistan with us. They're part of NATO. They cannot defend the exclusive economic zone around the Greenland enormous island. It's 27,000 miles of coastline. Off each of those miles, for 230 miles out to sea, is their exclusive economic zone. We need that to keep the Chinese from fishing it out, and we need that for Golden Dome. So we should get it, and the Danes should say thank you very much. What do you think?
I agree entirely, Hugh. And, you know, President Trump has articulated this from the Oval Office. He said, yes, the Danes are, you know, threatening to double their security. They're going to add an extra dog sled. I also thought it was charming when Mr. Macron said that he was going to be sending French forces to, you know, I don't know, carry out some exercises with the Danes. I happen to have the flag of the French army with me right here. You know, none of us are terribly quaking in our boots, I think, because of that. But furthermore, the whole framing is ridiculous. This isn't even a hostile action against Denmark or against France or NATO or Europe or anything like that. The simple fact is we're the United States. We are the protectors of the free world. We certainly, as a cornerstone of American foreign policy, protect the Western Hemisphere. And we just cannot allow our adversaries to take advantage in Greenland. So, you know, if Hamlet hadn't fallen, you know, if Denmark had remained a really strong power, then maybe we wouldn't have to do this. But we do, and we're going to do it. And I hope everyone gets on board because really this is helpful to the entire West.
Well, what makes me crazy is that everyone and I am a big fan of NATO. I want us to be deeply involved in NATO. I wanted them to get to 2%. The president got them there. I want them to get to 5%. He's going to get them there. We're sending weapons to Ukraine. I'm in favor of that. But if they need us this much, can they please just shut up about Greenland? Because they can't keep the Chinese fishing fleet out. They've got 20 ships in Denmark. And people don't know that the Chinese go around the world with the largest fishing fleet in the world, and they fish out entire regions. Like they almost killed the Galapagos off. Does your audience know that? They're just predatory.
You know, I don't know. There are probably some people in the audience, especially the Zoomers who are a little more fluid on their politics, who might not recognize that, you know, we do have adversaries around the world.
Right.
I think sometimes people, they get too ideologically abstract. And in some ways, this is a foreign operation. You saw it online with, you know, ops from Russia in particular to try to ideologize everything. But the fact is, Russia has a bunch of missiles pointed at us, and China is our chief geopolitical adversary. And politics is about more than abstractions and ideas on paper. It's about resources. It's about geography. It's about proximity. It's about oil, in fact. And it's about fishing, for that matter. And so, you know, getting back to a very realistic foreign policy, Trump gets that. And he's blunt about it, you know, and so he's been talking about this for a very long time. People wrote him off initially. It's been the policy of the U.S. State Department since the middle of the 19th century to acquire Greenland. Trump, once again, just seems like the guy who's actually going to do it.
So 2 minutes, Michael. Your assessment of what has happened to the left. They are going, in my view, over the left cliff. I think they're bringing along all the old moderates that they had left, and that a few of them are saying, what in the world is going on? But they are just fully committed to AOC land. And it's a fantasy land of Ben Rhodes and Barack Obama and John Kerry. And we can't throw them a rope because there isn't enough rope in the world to get them to climb back to reality.
Absolutely. This joke that somehow the Dems are going to moderate. You saw Gavin Newsom try this. To me, he's the canary in the coal mine. He launched that podcast and he said, you know what? I'm going to become friends with Charlie Kirk. I'm going to become friends with Steve Bannon. I'm going to position myself as a Bill Clinton for the 2020s. And what happened? 5 seconds later, he's up to his old tricks. He's calling Stephen Miller a fascist. He says he wants to see more trans kids, one of the most psychotic utterances I've ever heard from an American politician. He just realized that that wasn't going to work. And so I'm gleeful about it. It's too bad for my old city in New York. I feel bad for those guys out there up in Momdanistan. But, you know, that's the way their party is going. And it gives a lot of leeway for the Republicans. Never underestimate the ability of a Republican to clutch defeat from the jaws of victory. But right now, our opponents are putting us in a good spot.
You know, Gavin Newsom's podcast reminds me of Ben Shapiro as editor of Politico Playbook. It lasted like a day because the left can't accommodate it. They really don't know how to sit down and have an argument. And in my day, I'm older than you. I'm a generation ahead of you. But your day, I'll bet you had some sort of sane liberals, right? Henry Jackson liberals, Scoop Jackson liberals at Yale. Were they in existence in your day?
There were still, some fleeting few. In fact, I have a debate show. We filmed one of them last night called Bar Fight, and we had one guy who's trying to position himself as a moderate Democrat, Adam Mockler. He goes on CNN a fair bit, and he kept trying to make the Democratic Party seem much more moderate and reasonable. But we had another liberal on the panel, and when he would do it, I'd say, "Hey, hold on, I want to check this. Do you really believe that as a Democrat?" And just would get smacked down every time. Sorry,
is Bar
guys.
Fight a podcast, or is it a only YouTube for video? Where do we find Bar Fight?
I think as of now, it's only been released on YouTube. But you make a good point, Hugh. I think we got to get it out there all over the place and maybe reveal where the fissures really lie.
Oh, I love that idea, because if you can find even remotely comprehensible leftists, I would like to hear them try and defend the people to their left, which cannot be done, as you say, in Mamdanistan. Michael, good to have you on. Michael Knowles and I met up in a green room, and I said, it's been too while. We just got to get you on. Thank you, Michael. Joined now by Alex Gray. Alex is the CEO of American Global Strategies. In the first Trump term, he was the chief of staff at the National Security Council under our friend Ambassador Robert O'Brien. Alex, welcome. I have been talking nonstop about Iran and what did not happen last night, an American strike, and whether or not we should draw any conclusions from that. And into that picture came more information today that the Lincoln Strike Group has begun to be deployed to the Middle East, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has asked Donald Trump to slow down a little bit. What's your assessment of this situation?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. I think the president's got two things going for him. One is ambiguity. We always associate strategic ambiguity with Taiwan. But as you know well, the president has said for years, one of the things he admires about President Nixon was the madman theory. And he loves the fact that leaders don't know what he's going to do. And he's demonstrated, whether it was Midnight Hammer in the summer or it was the Caracas operation, he has re-injected that element of uncertainty into our global posture. And it keeps adversaries like Iran on their toes. So he's got that going for him. The second thing he has is he's restored deterrence. Just because of the operations I mentioned, the successful terrorist strikes against terrorists that he's done since he came back, the sense from his first term that the president doesn't pull his punches. There's no more Afghanistan debacle. There's no more failure of deterrence in Ukraine. Between those two things, the return of ambiguity and the return of deterrence, I think we have a situation where the Iranians are taking a much more measured approach than we have seen them take to previous protests.
Now, there are thousands of people alleged to be dead in Iran, and they stopped doing it last night, if whatever little gets out of Iran is correct. We really don't know because they've been blacked out. I have been arguing that we can't draw any conclusions about President Trump's promises on this show last week to Sean Hannity, to Tony DeCopel, and on True Social, because there's just not enough time to stage something. You were there at the National Security Council. How long would it take to stage the assets you need to make a meaningful strike on the Iranian regime that would in any way advance America's national interest or help the protesters? Because he said help is on the way.
Yeah, Hugh, it doesn't take it doesn't take that much depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Now, is it a demonstration effect? Is he going to use this as an opportunity to degrade regime targets that are used for repression? Is he going to use it as an opportunity to go after leadership targets? Is he going to try and go after, is this aimed at the missile program and elements of the nuclear program that maybe survived Midnight Hammer? I mean, where he's actually focused is going to determine to a great extent what type of assets are needed. I would be very much remiss, Hugh, if I didn't mention the fact that a lot of these assets stage out of the American base at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. And this week, the British House of Lords was actually debating whether to turn that base, the island that base sits on, over to the nation of Mauritius, which is a Chinese influenced country, heavily influenced by the Chinese Communist Party. That is a very real threat to the type of asset allocation that you're talking about here. But long story short, depending on the target, we can put a lot of potential assets in place relatively quickly.
The Abraham Lincoln and the strike group with it has been redirected from the South China Sea to the Middle East. About how long does that take Alex Gray. I don't know how fast carriers go or how long it takes to get a carrier strike group or how the fastest ship leads. What's your estimate? 2 weeks?
Depending on how quickly you're willing to move them, and if you're willing to spend the resource, you're willing to spend the money, you're willing to steam them at their fastest speed, probably about a week. Depend if you want to do it, if you have an exigent circumstance, I think you do about a week.
All right. Now, the next thing I want to ask you is about Karg Island. And I've tried a couple of people thus far, and they've waved me off. I got Michael Duran coming on next week who can tell me about it. Does Karg Island benefit the people of Iran in any way? It benefits the regime. They sell their oil through Karg Island. It goes to China, so it helps China. Is it a legitimate target, or is it something we ought to say, no, we can't do that for A, B, and C reasons?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out at this point. I wouldn't take things off the list because the goal here, Hugh, is to influence regime behavior. I think the moment they get a sense that the administration's willing to start bracketing certain things for arbitrary reasons, and Michael Duran's is a friend and he's super smart on these issues. But I think on this, I would be very hesitant to take anything off the table, particularly publicly, while we're trying to alter how the mullahs are calculating their interests.
All right. Now, I also want to go back to term one. I said on Fox News this morning, Dana Perino, Greenland was on the table in the first Trump term. It's back on the table, and he knows he's got 3 years left, and he wants to get it done. And God bless the Danes, all 6 million of them, but there's 230 miles of exclusive economic zone, around 27,000 miles of coastland, and they can't protect that from the Chinese fishing fleet, much less hypersonic missiles. How serious do you rate the acquisition of Greenland as an inevitability? How do you think it's going to happen?
Oh, Hugh, I think it's going to happen one way or the other. I don't think this is a question of whether, it's a question of how. I think it's important for everyone to understand something. This is not a Donald Trump phenomenon. American presidents since Andrew Johnson have been trying to do this. Woodrow Wilson, FDR actually occupied Greenland, Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower. That's not because this is a Trumpian pet project. That's because there is an intrinsic strategic value in Greenland's location. Chinese submarines go past Greenland all the time, headed to the North Pole. The Wall Street Journal reported this. The Danes didn't even know about it, according to the public reporting. We have right now the ability to put substantial assets on Greenland under the 1951 agreement. I hope the administration takes full advantage of that and puts as many assets, including anti-submarine warfare assets, on Greenland now. But that doesn't negate the fact that ultimately, Hugh, Greenland's going to be independent. They were on that path for 50 years. The president's rhetoric has kind of led them to hedge a little bit. What's ultimately going to happen, though, they will be independent. And when they are, the choice is very clear. Are they going to be gobbled up and coerced by the Chinese, like the Solomon Islands and like countries in Africa? Or are they going to have a relationship with the United States, whether that's a direct one, like an insular area, like Virgin Islands or Guam? Or are they going to be an independent country in free association with the United States, like the Marshall Islands or Palau? That's the question.
Now, when we say that, and we've got a minute, what does that mean, say, vis-a-vis the comparison with Puerto Rico? I was thinking they could be sovereign like Puerto Rico, but also a commonwealth. What does that mean to be in association with?
So a compact of free association would be, to use the example of the Marshall Islands, they'd be an independent state. They would be have representation at the UN. They would conduct their own foreign policy, but they would have their defense would be the responsibility of the United States. They would have unlimited access for the United States for military purposes, and we would, very importantly, have the right of denial. So we would be able to deny another power access to their land, air, or sea. That is, I think, a great option that would allow Greenland to keep its sovereignty. The other option, as you were talking about, Hugh, Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, it could be a direct territory of the United States administered by the Interior Department with elements of local self-government. That's also a great option.
Alex Gray, I always come to you for actual experience on the questions of the day. Thank you so much. CEO of American Global Strategies, Alex Gray, on Greenland, joined by Selena Zito. Selena Zito is the author of Butler. I like to say she is President Trump's favorite journalist because I think she is. She is, of course, for my new audience, the person who coined the term about seriously and literally. That is, the left takes the president literally but not seriously, and Trump supporters take the president seriously but not literally. Applying your lens and your experience, Selena, what does his messaging about Iran mean to you?
Stay tuned. I think it means that we're not done here, and I'm not going to show my hand. And I think he showed us that with Venezuela, right? You led up to Venezuela all fall, like, oh, something's going to happen, something's going to happen, something's going to happen. Then it was 3 weeks where nobody thought something was going to happen, and then something happened. So I think he likes. I don't know if this stagecraft sort of element of surprise, but he doesn't let, as much as people think he wants to show his hand, he does not want to show his hand on this at all.
On this program last week, the president said, if the Iranians keep killing their people, we're going to go in. And then he said on Truth Social, help is on the way, MEGA, make Iran great again. Then he told Sean Hannity that. Then he told Tony DeCopel that if they keep killing their people, they haven't killed their people for a day that we know about. I think we're at the end of the beginning. I don't even think we're at the middle of this yet. But I do think he's going to do what he can to help the people of Iran, but it's got to fit in America's national interest. Do you agree?
100% agree with you. 100%. It's always been the people that confuse sort of what happened in Venezuela and what's happening in Iran as not being America first. Don't have the concept of nuance and understanding long-term impact, not just economically but also safety-wise. And so I think that the way he deliberates things is America first. But I just say sit back and just watch, because whatever you think is going to happen, you're not meaning you, right? But critics in particular, you've never really understood him, and you continue to show that you don't.
So the last subject in this list is Greenland. I was on Fox with Dana Perino today, and I said, he's serious about Greenland. He was serious about Greenland in the first term. He's even more serious about Greenland in this term, and that something's got to get worked out here because the Danes can't protect Greenland from the Chinese Communist fishing fleet, much less their hypersonics. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's very serious about Greenland, and I am so bummed out. I was invited to go by J.D. Vance's to go to Greenland when he went over the summer, but it was the same week my book came out, and it was just not something I could do.
No.
But this is Alaska all over again, except people don't have the historic understanding of why Alaska was important, because it was 1867, eventually it was 1959, but there was a strategic reason why we did it right post the Civil War. The same thing that went for Hawaii, right? I mean, all you have to do is look at a map. I think more people need geography, right?
Oh, yes.
Look at Greenland, and then you go, oh, now I get it.
All right, so last question. Your most recent column is about batteries. And of course, it's about a Western Pennsylvania battery company. Do I need to read this? I mean, I don't care about electric cars. Do I need to know about Western Pennsylvania battery companies?
Right. So everyone's been talking about AI's taking away their job. AI's taking away their job. Well, in places like where we grew up, Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, the people that are making the data power centers that are supplying them with the workforce, but also the intellect coming from Case Western, coming from Pitt, coming from CMU. All this is an incubation of layers of a workforce that are going to make and supply the energy for AI data power centers. If there's going to be a sea change, it's going to be about how it's the opposite of what happened to us in 77, in that the very workers, that DNA that was taken away are now the people that are going to have the most impact in our economy.
I sure hope you're right for not just Pittsburgh. Sorry about Mike Tomlin. Good things can't last forever. I know you're a Yinzer and you're a Steelers fan, but he got tired of you. 19 years, a good run. But I outlasted him, Selena Zito. So did you. Follow Selena on X at Zito Selena. Get all of her columns by signing up for them at selenazito.com. I'm joined by Josh Kraushaar on the Hugh Hewitt Show. He's editor-in-chief of the Jewish Insider. Josh, welcome. Two headlines for you from the Wall Street Journal at this hour. Trump was told attack on Iran wouldn't guarantee collapse of regime. The president was advised that the U.S. military would need more firepower in the Middle East to launch a large-scale attack. And, second headline, Iran's heavy crackdown quiets protests. An internet shutdown has made it difficult to determine the scale of the protests, but some Iranians say an eerie quiet has taken over. What's your assessment of the situation both there and inside Donald Trump's inner ring?
Well, Hugh, let's take things back a couple days when Trump posted on his Truth Social page, help is on the way to the Iranian protesters. So there's been a widespread expectation, not just within Washington, but among the overall public, that there would be some kind of military action. Now, when and how, it was sort of the big question mark, but there was a sense that Trump, kind of put his words behind the likelihood of some kind of military strike against Iran. The big challenge, Hugh, and I think you kind of raised that in the first headline, which is that there really the Pentagon until earlier this week hadn't moved any forces in preparation for potential military strikes, and there was some reporting in the last few hours that a lot of the U.S. Gulf state allies, including Saudi Arabia, but also Israel, were a little bit concerned about the timing of a strike, that they wanted to, and in the case of Israel, I think they wanted more time to prepare about the after effects of any potential military strike against Iran. So look, I think there are two ways of looking at this. I think one way of looking at it is that the White House might want more time to see what's going on in Iran, but also to build the military presence up in the Middle East, which was pretty sparse as of earlier in the week. But there also may be some second guessing within the White House, and there may be some factions looking to try to get an off ramp and not go through with any military action. So a little bit of uncertainty in what the White House is eventually going to do, but just because nothing has happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
That's it. I'm going to come back and ask you, what is the window for saying he cried wolf? Because he did say help is on the way. He did urge Iranian protesters to take over their institutions. And some commentators are saying bait and switch, he got people killed. I don't think so. I think that he's got at least a month and probably 2 months to do something. He did turn the Abraham Lincoln strike group, the carrier Lincoln, and the strike group that accompanies it left. They're heading back to the Middle East from the South China Sea. And we don't know what's going on. But we know that the carrier strike force is on the way. Second bit of information, I don't know if you can confirm this, Eliana Johnson told me Netanyahu called him and said, not yet. Yeah, we need more time. What do you think about those two pieces of information?
So we don't have that independently confirmed. We are looking into it on the Israeli side, but the New York Times and I believe Barak Ravid at Axios said that Israel did counsel's patience. I think there was a lot of concern in Israel of what Iran would do in case of a U.S. military strike, with the fear being that Iran would take out or would respond by attacking Israel. So I think there is concern in Israel, and Netanyahu may have expressed those concerns. It does seem to be on the public reporting that it's more of a question of timing and preparation. But it's not just Israel; it's a lot of the Gulf state allies. There was also reporting in the same New York Times story that Saudi Arabia, also Qatar, were very, very, very aggressively advocating the Trump administration not to go ahead with military strikes against Iran. And who knows if that had any bearing on Trump's decision making. But there is a lot of competing guidance that Trump is getting, and you could tell when he had that public availability yesterday at the White House that Trump at least was changing his tune and sounded like he was willing to accept the notion that some of the actually, I guess he was talking about one specific execution, but also that some of the massacres were not taking place anymore. I mean, as far as I know, we don't really know what's going on the ground in Iran, and I would not take the Iranian government's word for any credibility. So
well, that brings me to the Brett Baer interview, Josh.
Yeah.
The foreign minister last night said Mossad was killing Iranians in order to bring Donald Trump into the war that is ongoing between Iran and Israel. It was crazy talk. Did you hear that? Do you have a reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, it reminded me of like when we going back to the Iraq War when you saw Baghdad Bob, spouting the most inane propaganda from his palace. Yeah, like the Iranian. I mean, it just shows how desperate. I think there were all kinds of just ridiculous propaganda coming from the Iranian regime, both in the interview on Fox with Bret Baier, but also in separate interviews that they gave to other media outlets. But yeah, I mean, this is how desperate and how deranged, frankly, this Iranian regime. This is the foreign minister that was talking to Bret. And he sounded as crazy and extreme and just deluded as you would expect from any dictatorship that has lost touch with its people.
So, given that the president did tell the people of Iran, help is on the way, what's your time frame for assessing whether or not that was chatter or that was real?
Hugh, you said a month or two. I would say a week or two. I'm hearing from different sources are kind of having different reactions to what's happened in the last 24 hours. Some are actually bullish that there could be a larger scale action, that there's more coordination taking place behind the scenes, which is certainly possible. Lindsey Graham, who has been very vocal on this issue, is actually going to be in Israel. He actually is just leaving, I think, today to go and meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu. So there may be more coordination, more conversation taking place for a wider scale operation. The other option, which I think is very possible as well, is that there may be trying to walk back some of the rhetoric that was made, and maybe just willing to take a small loaf if there isn't any more horrible violent crackdowns. Maybe Trump is willing to take that and willing to pause on any operations for now. So I think we'll know
that as a win. I don't know that I can count that as a win. Can you count that as a win? Given that
I would not.
No.
This is a brutal regime. They're always going to be cracking down on their people, and it's going to happen again. So I think, I think what we learned with Obama, the red line. Look how disastrous Obama not living up to his red line in Syria back in 2013 was. I think this is one of those similar moments.
Yeah, when you put the American presidency on the table, you get a window, but if you don't act in that window, your credibility is badly damaged. I don't think Donald Trump wants that, but we will see. Josh Kraushaar of Jewish Insider, thank you. One of our great sponsors, andrewandtodd.com. By the way, coming up, Senator Shelley Moore Capito. You don't want to miss next hour. Stay tuned to the Salem News Channel or this station. Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia. They had the lawsuit in front of the Supreme Court this week. And I'll have on Seth Mandel from Commentary, Jim Garrity from National Review. We'll talk about what's going on in Iran and what didn't happen yet. As far as we know, we don't know everything. We don't know anything, actually. We just know what we can see, and we can't see much into Iran. But that's a big hour coming up. But andrewandtodd.com. I was giving a speech last night, a bunch of Republicans who are really invested in California. They're trying very hard to save California. They're running candidates wherever they think they have a prayer. I saw people running for supervisor, people running for legislature, people running for Secretary of State. The Republican Party's not dead. But I also found out home sales are home availability are half what they were 3 years ago. The inventory, talk to a realtor, is doing really well. The inventory is 50% of what it was 3 years ago at the end of the first COVID splurge. It's never come back. People are never going to give up those 3% mortgages that Joe Biden killed. They're never going to let go. There are only 2,200 homes on the market in Orange County. That's what I was told last night. Don't know if it's true, but I was told that by a guy who's very successful. Let me tell you this. If you're buying a home in California or you're buying a home in Connecticut, whether you're buying one in Florida or you're buying one in Montana, call andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. They are with Union Home Mortgage. They are the banker. They write the loan. They underwrite the loan. They get your credit fixed. They get you the best rate that's possible. They give you a letter of approval, pre-qualification, so you're on the same level playing field with every other buyer out there. When you walk into a home and you want to buy it, there are fewer houses. But the home sales went up 5% last month, year over year, which is a big bump for December. So the market is a buyer's market right now. Don't know how long it's going to stay that way. Get pre-qualified. If you're a veteran, you don't want to put any money down, andrewandtodd.com. If you're a first-time home buyer, andrewandtodd.com. And if you're a senior citizen and you want a reverse mortgage, never make another payment, you have to pay your taxes, your your homeowner association fees, but you want to get some money, some of your equity out of your house. And a lot of Californians want to do that. Reverse mortgages, Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian at andrewandtodd.com. 888-1172. As I told you in the first hour, I bragged a little bit. I went up the Implacable Hill today. And the Implacable Hill, man, I took it in my Relief Factor. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Took it in hour one. You saw me do it. And it works well. I'm feeling great. And I had 2 days off. So I got up the Implacable Hill on Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday I had it off. And then I went back up on Thursday. And tomorrow I'll probably go back up it. And then the long run will be on Friday. But Relief Factor has kicked in. I'm feeling great. And I really want to encourage you. No one came up to me last night to tell me that they were a Relief Factor user. I never solicit, but I usually do find someone in a crowd of that sort that will come up and say, thanks for the Relief Factor tip. It works for me. Happened 2 nights ago. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Try it for 3 weeks. The 3-week starter pack is $19.95. Try it for 3 weeks. See if you haven't got considerable relief from minor aches and pains, and exercise the aches and pains that go with it. Or go find the starter pack at their website at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. So pleased to welcome back to the program Senator Shelley Moore Capito, who represents the great state of West Virginia. Senator Capito, I heard you on with my colleague Scott Jennings earlier today. I'm going to go in reverse order of the subjects that you covered with Scott. I want to start, you're on appropriations, chaired by Susan Collins. I think I heard you say CR, no shutdown. I was hoping we'd actually pass all 11 appropriations bills. How many do you think are actually going to get passed and the rest go into the minibus?
I think that we'll pass them all except for one, and that's Homeland Security. I think because of what's going on with the ICE situation, and it's always a very difficult bill because I chaired that subcommittee myself. I think with it, Katie Britt's working hard day and night to try to get to a negotiated settlement there, but it's looking a little grim. So I think we'll get them all, but that one, which would be a remarkable achievement for us as appropriators, for Susan as the chair, and really for the House and Senate. And so I'm very pleased about that because it brings our spending down and it gets our priorities and the president's priorities more in line with our appropriations.
Do you expect then a shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security? Because that includes a whole bunch of things beyond ICE that people won't want shut down, even if they don't like ICE. And I think that's a 90-10 issue, as Scott was saying, maybe 95-5, as on the gender issues that we'll get to. But does that mean a shutdown for DHS?
No, I think what will happen here, Hugh, is I think the last 5 bills will come through because the House is in next week. We are not. They're going to pass the bills. If they get a Homeland Security bill, we'll pass it through here. If not, what I envision is we'll have 5 bills with a continuing resolution just for Homeland Security. So there would be no shutdown. Because you're right, Homeland Security it's TSA, it's FEMA, it's Coast Guard, it's Secret Service. There's a lot in there that essential services.
All right. Now, Senator, I had President Trump on a week ago. He said he wants $1.5 trillion next year for the Department of War. That's $600 billion more, roughly $600 billion more than you passed this year. What do you make of that?
Well, that's a steep hill. I think that as we're now trying to shrink these bills, but still keep the vibrant Department of the defense authorizations and the appropriations robust when we see what's going on around the world, another $600 billion is going to be very, very difficult. It's either going to be major cuts in other areas or we're going to again be overspending. And so I think there'll probably be a compromise. I would love to see more money to the Department of War, but I'm not sure. I don't think we have the bandwidth to go that high. I really don't. And so we'll have to see what happens as we move through the year.
Oh, now, Senator, you also made a funny comment. I laughed in the car when you said Scott brought up Iran. He said, well, Scott, this is really my generation. I laughed. You got out of Duke about the time I got out of Harvard and about the time that the mullahs came back from France and took over Iran and exiled the Shah and took our embassy. So it's imprinted on our generation, right? We'd love that regime to go. I think the president's going to wait until the Lincoln Carrier Group is close enough to provide air cover to Israel in the event the mullahs fire ballistics back. What's your sense of the situation?
Well, I mean, I think it's remarkable to see. We've seen from time to time Iran, in uprisings and then calm back down. This seems to me to be a lot more. And, I can't help but think that, is there a tie here with Maduro out of the picture, one of Iran's big proponents? Is there a tie here, a crumbling of and weakening of some of these rogue nations like Iran or Cuba? Obviously, we've already seen that in Venezuela. So I would like to think that there's a grand plan here. I'm not sure there is. So what I think is because they've cut the internet, because they've tried to shelter what's actually happening in that country from the world, tells me it's a lot worse than what it really is. And when the general public becomes an uprising, it gets to a tipping point where all of a sudden it's tipping in their favor. And I think we're very close to that. So I think if I was in the neighborhood, this is going to be pivotal for them. They're funding Hezbollah, Hamas, all the terrorist groups all around, probably in Yemen too. And so I think I'd like to see them step up and help Iran tip to the freedom. But I don't see our involvement being anything at the present time, and certainly not boots on the ground in the end.
Now, last question before we move to the Supreme Court cases. I sort of see Iran as ruthless beyond ruthless, like Stalin ruthless and Mao ruthless. They've mowed down at least 5,000 people, maybe double that number. They've put that number of people in prison. That's in 1 week. So I just want to go back to Operation Midnight Hammer. I'm very glad the president blew up their nuclear program, because I think these people would threaten and would use nuclear weapons against Israel. Have you factored that in yet to your assessment of Midnight Hammer?
I have thought it. Yes, I have. And I think it absolutely was a very precise mission that achieved the desired results. I had to kind of laugh because remember Baghdad Bob from Iraq, where he kept saying everything's great and his country is folding around him. Well, they had one of the defense ministers or something on from Iran, and he said, well, if the U.S. gets into this, it's going to be another failed thing like they did in June. I'm like, you mean when we took your nuclear facilities out successfully? So, I mean, they don't even have a shred of truth in any of this. And so I do think by defanging that, the moral structure there is so much different that they could justify, in the name of a radical religion, wiping out the free world with their nuclear capabilities. And thank goodness they're not going to be able to do that because of the
I think you're referring to Brett Baer's interview with the foreign minister last night. It was a Baghdad Bob moment. He blamed the Jews in the end. He said the Jews were killing the protesters in Tehran, and it was so insane. But we got to get a carrier group there, because if they fire off all those ballistic missiles, we help Israel prevent the worst. Now let's turn to Title IX, Senator, because West Virginia and Idaho both passed statutes that are pretty simply put: boys may not play in girls' sports. We have 3 categories: boys, girls, and people who are confused. And about those people, we want to have compassion and care, but we also want to protect girls' sports and spaces. And I don't think it's going to be close on the Supreme Court. I listened to a lot of the argument. They might get Justice Brown Jackson on some critical legal theories out there from a different legal planet than I've been on for a long time. I think you're going to win in the state of West Virginia walking away. What was your sense after the argument?
I definitely think that we will win. I mean, it's just a common sense fairness issue in my view. I mean, here again, I'm dating myself, but I remember when Title IX came into being. I was actually playing a sport at college at the time, and the differences that Title IX made in women's sports just in the very beginning was amazing to watch. And so now it's even more and more. And I think we've encouraged our girls, we've encouraged women's sports. There are all kind of benefits to sports that we don't even talk about besides winning and losing and physical prowess. And so, but if you're going to throw a kinker in here and have unfair competition, it depresses the team, the sport, and the ability to participate. Honestly, I'm with you. I have compassion for people that are in this category, like the young lady in West Virginia. But at the same time, she's made a choice, and the choice is if you make this choice, you're not going to be permitted to play in girls' sports. I mean, that's a logical choice. We make choices every day, and that's a choice that she's made. And so, we'll see. I think it's going to be overwhelming. I didn't hear any argument that was compelling at all, especially when you say, Alito's like, can you define a girl? And they're like, well, we didn't really look into that. Well, then how am I going to tell you what girls can play in girls' sports if you don't tell me what a girl is?
Yeah,
And so,
Justice Alito had me laughing. Don't get in an argument with him or Justice Thomas because he said,
No.
okay, Title IX is supposed to protect girls' sports. If we can't define girl, how are we supposed to protect girls' sports? And the poor ACLU lawyer was absolutely speechless because it is a 95-5 issue. So, Senator, Scott went global on you. I'm going to go global on you. I think the Democratic Party has lost the theme. I think they've gone off the left edge because of their activist base, and they've lost touch on so many things, and they're deranged by President Trump. He's got on their brain, as your former colleague, now Vice President Vance has. Do any of them come up to you in the Senate and say, I don't know what happened to the party I started with 20 years ago? Because this is not the Democratic Party of our youth with Scoop Jackson and Democrats like that. Got a minute, Senator.
well, I look at my own state that was totally run by the Democrats for 80 years. And guess what? There's not a single office holder now there, except maybe 7 in the state legislature. It is a different party. They don't seem to be as bothered about it as I would be. I guess because they can still win in pockets of this country that would give them significant representation. When they win in Georgia, that's a problem. They may not. Hopefully, they won't win again there. But they are appealing to every parts of their party. And even though it's shrinking, I think they think that they're on the high ground.
Well, my hat is off to you, Chairwoman Collins, everyone on approach for getting the work done, and to West Virginia for leading the way with Idaho on common sense legislation on girls and boys sports. And we agree on Iran. Always good to talk to you, Senator. Thank you for appearing on the Hugh Hewitt Show. From Senator Shelley Moore Capito to Seth Mandel of the Commentary Podcast, where he's senior editor at Commentary and the Commentary Podcast. Seth, I've already listened to Commentary's podcast today, where 4 of you and Eliana and Christine Rosen, and actually 5, Abe was there, and John, were trying to come up with how do we connect the dots of the Trump foreign policy. Before I give you my assessment of your show, what do you think you 5 agreed on, if anything?
That Trump cares about American power and influence in the world overall. So whether, he doesn't seem to care whether there's a transition to, or a quick transition to, a full-fledged democracy in Venezuela. He isn't sure how hard to go at Iran in terms of, whether he really wants to force a regime change, but he knows that he doesn't want Iran being able to mess with us, and he knows that he doesn't want Maduro's crew being able to mess with us. So I would say the common thread is power.
Yeah, I agree with
Strength.
that. What I was waiting for someone to say, he's a realist. He's a Nixonian realist. What are the cards I've been dealt? What outcomes can I achieve? Where are my carriers? The one thing I don't think I heard any of you 5 say, the big development yesterday on our side is the Lincoln Strike Group was diverted from the South China Sea to go to the Middle East. I have a feeling, I have no information, I'm just guessing, we need that strike group in the vicinity of Israel if we strike Iran, because they'll go ballistic missile, and we have to help Israel against the ballistic missiles. You were just in Israel. Did anyone brief you on the damage that the Iranian ballistic missile fusillade from June did?
Yeah, we even met one of the missiles, actually, or a piece of the missile place we were staying, some shrapnel of an intercepted missile. Yeah, I mean, the damage is real, but Israel has degraded Iran's missile capabilities a great deal. And Iran is essentially now in a race to try to rebuild those missile capabilities. I think that's why the window is now also. I think that they're less concerned about a full-on Iranian response, but it's certainly possible. And it's also possible that there could be a response from Hezbollah in Lebanon, although they've been greatly weakened and they have signaled that they also don't really want to mess with the bull right now. So, I think that the Israelis are not quite as the Israelis are not looking to start something up with Iran right now. And I think that they're fine with President Trump waiting. But I think that President Trump is the one that really is the prime mover on this. And the Israelis are ready and willing to do their part in this, whatever that may be, most likely in ensuring that this doesn't turn into a regional war, regional conflagration, in which Trump's critics can say, look what you started a wildfire.
Now, something I also heard yesterday, which I didn't hear you guys mention, is that Qatar had told the United States we may not use the airbase in Qatar for missions in Iran. If that is in fact the case, we ought to move the airbase. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, the airbase is, as of now, the airbase is doing more harm than good because the Qataris are using it to shield themselves. So yeah, I mean, if we can't use it for what we need to use it for, what are we supposed to use? We're supposed to use the airbase in Qatar to launch satellites into space. I mean, it's an airbase. If we can't use it as an airbase, put it somewhere we can use it.
So President Trump was on the program last week, right at this time, and I asked him, I said, I think I've got a definition of the Trump doctrine. Don't threaten Americans. Don't kill Americans, or we will kill you quicker and harder and longer. And he added, and don't send drugs into our country, but I guess you could include that in don't kill Americans. I think the Trump doctrine is pretty easy, a very realism-driven, what is in the best interest of the United States, plus what can I get done with a near certain guarantee of no fiasco. He doesn't want Eagle Claw, which was Desert One. Some people remembered it Desert One. And he had General Kane, who I think he trusts a great deal, and Secretary Rubio in the office when he was talking to me about that. I think those two plus J.D. Vance, those are the big three, and Pete Hegseth, the big four with Trump. But their envelope to me, Seth, is that it's got to be able to work, and we got to do second-order impacts, which might include these people are crazy in Iran. They're evil, crazy. And I think they'd fire off everything they could at Israel. They can't, and maybe at our air base. And we have to get ready for that. I think that's what Kane told them. I'm guessing, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think they have to be prepared for anything, and that's why you've seen embassies thin out in the region and stuff like that. But the main point is that this is kind of offensive realism. I think is the tradition. You know, it's more associated with funnily enough John Bolton and people like that than sort of the neoconservatives, because it basically means, you know, if you threaten us or you hit us, we're going to hit back twice as hard. If you need to be punched in the nose, we're going to bloody you up, and we're not going to clean up the mess. We're not going to stay there and help you transition to some sort of new government or whatever if you accept the consequences of your own actions. So if you pick a fight with us, you're going to be sorry, and we're not going to hang around to clean up the mess. It's going to be your mess to clean up. So I think that holds through all of the members of the administration, just to different degrees.
I agree with that.
At what point they're willing to trigger that.
I think that is exactly correct. I was on Fox this morning. Dana Perino got in a question about Venezuela because Ms. Machado's at the White House today. Said, that's great. I don't think we're there for regime change. We're for regime evolution. And we like regime collapse if that's what happens in Iran, but we're not into the regime change business as understood Iraq 2003 through the surge. That we took Maduro out. He was blocking change. The evolution has begun. We took another tanker today. We are, in fact, running Venezuela, but they're not ready for Machado to get back yet. And I'm okay taking time to get to where we need to go, but I like to play offense. I think he's just very Nixonian to me, Seth. I don't even think it's that complicated. I think there's a bit of anti-Trumpism on the podcast today, and Christine and maybe Abe a little bit is suspicious of him. But generally, it's just Trump protecting American interests to the extent he can without courting disaster.
I think so. I think he doesn't want chaos is the main thing. He doesn't want to get involved in something that he can't predict really where it's going to go. And so in Venezuela, it's not that he has a big problem with Machado. It's that he doesn't feel she and her team are ready to take on the burden of a transition. He did this regarding Iran the other day too, where he said the Crown Prince Pahlavi seems like a good guy, but I don't know. Does he have the support? I'm not sure if he has it right now to be handed a country of 90 million people or whatever. So that's basically his thing, is that it's not that he's opposed to a pro-democracy leader like Pahlavi. It's just he's not going to do Pahlavi's work for him, and he's not going to do Machado's work for her. He's going to do his work for him and America's work for America. That's how he sees it. And so if you present to him a chaos-free or reasonably chaos-free plan to transition a government in Venezuela or in Iran, he will be listening. But for now, he's not taking any chances.
Yeah, I would frame it. If you present to him a plan that will significantly advance a real, genuine American interest at relatively low cost, he will do it. And I'll talk with Seth after the break about what Israel's going to do, whether or not it helps the United States, because they get to do what's in their interest too. Seth Mandel of Commentary has hung around because the Commentary podcast is a very interesting conversation about what is the Trump doctrine. And the answer is we don't know what it is as applied to Iran Part 2 yet. Seth, what is the time frame that the average listener in the car or watcher on the Salem News Channel ought to have in their head to judge what the president did in Iran? Because he did say 8 different times, help is on the way, said it to me. He posted it, he told it to Sean Hannity, he told it to Tony DeCopel, and when Tony DeCopel said there are going to be hangings, he went, what? Hangings? That's out of line. So he did tell the Iranian people, we're going to help you, and we haven't done anything yet that we've seen. What's the time limit for deciding whether or not he baited and switched on the Iranian people?
I think it's just a few days now. I think the fact that he said publicly, well, they appear to have stopped the killing, or some version of that, means there's days, because the Iranians have a window now, and they're getting control of the protests. They're getting the demonstrations somewhat under control, and as long as they don't do anything as provocative as they were talking about, public executions, things like that.
Right.
They feel like they have a window now to try to slow things down. We don't have great eyes on the ground. I think it's just a few days before this inertia would settle in and become permanent, or semi-permanent for now anyway.
So I think I'm watching the Lincoln, because I really do think that the strike carrier group has got missile defense capabilities that were used when Israel was attacked. And that brings me to Israel. Israel's got to go get the missile capability, because it was if they keep building at the pace they are said to be building, they don't need the nuke cloak. That was we obliterated their nuclear program. President Trump did that. But the great reveal was that ballistic missile program is a existential threat too. Is that now recognized in Israel?
Absolutely. Yeah, without question. That was something that wasn't talked about as much, because the nuke was also the nuclear threat, was also an existential threat, and it was a wider global threat, and it was, easy for people to comprehend the danger of it. But there's no question that the Israelis understand and state clearly and openly that the ballistic missile program in Iran could also be an existential threat, because they could simply overwhelm Israel's air defenses. We saw it last time, and it's not something that it's not a button they could push tomorrow, but the program itself does represent an existential threat. And if they're going to race to get it back up, that's the deterrent they're looking for also, which means that if they can get the ballistic missile program back up, they feel like they have a deterrent even without the nuclear program, because they know that they can overwhelm Israel's air defenses, at least for periods at a time, and therefore they'll be more likely to stave off any sort of Israeli strike, and maybe even an American strike, in that time frame. So yeah, the race to get the ballistic missile program up and running is a race to get Iran in a sort of field of protection again. And what it does inside that field of protection is not going to be anything that the United States or Israel likes.
Last bit of information. There's nothing good about mowing down between 2,000 and 12,000 people and capturing as many people and sending them off to urban prison. Zero good. But there is a side effect, which is clarity about the nature of the regime and why they couldn't get nukes and why they can't have all the missiles. They'll do anything. They are Stalin-esque and Maoist. They don't care. They mow down their own people. You think even the left wing in America has got to realize that JCPOA, Community of Nations, regional power, Barack Obama, Ben Rhodes, John Kerry nonsense is just that nonsense now?
I don't know if they realized it, but I hope so, because what this is showing is that, first of all, who would trust them with any deal, whatever it said? And second of all, these are people who will obviously use any advantage they have to hurt America. They say it out loud. They mean it. They tried to kill President Trump twice, reportedly. But all of this, the Yemenite missiles from Yemen, being shot at American tankers also. There's no question that Iran wants to hurt America and is happy to hurt America. It's not just an Israeli concern. And I think that has been made obvious also because the people who have been screaming for 2 years about supposed Israeli atrocities in Gaza have not really found it in their hearts to muster the same emotion and valence for the protesters in Iran, who are just being, as you said, mowed down in the streets. It's not a war. It's not even a civil war. It's just the regime executing people in large numbers in public.
A massacre. It's just a massacre. Seth Mandel, thank you for spending 2 segments with me. I will send everyone to the Commentary Podcast, wherever podcasts are. Great discussion today about the nature of what President Trump has done or not done and whether or not he baited and switched. I think I'm giving him 2 months to figure out, because strategic surprise is useful. Thank you, Seth Mandel. Jim Garrity the Indispensable, senior editor at National Review, host of the 3 Martini podcast, columnist at the Washington Post. He gets you the morning jolt every day if you sign up for it over at nationalreview.com. Jim, I want to cut to the chase. Seth Mandel was just on for 2 segments. I listened to the Commentary podcast this morning. They're trying to figure out the Trump doctrine. Did he bait and switch the Iranian people? My answer is the Trump doctrine is pretty simple. Don't kill Americans, don't threaten Americans, don't send drugs in the United States. And if I think you're a long-term threat and I can take you out, I'll take you out, but it better not be expensive or hurt Americans. I think he trusts General Kane, Secretary Rubio, J.D. Vance, and Pete Hegseth. And I think it's too soon to judge what's going on in Iran. All I saw happen yesterday was the Lincoln Strike Group turned left and is headed to the Middle East. What's your assessment of what the president has done or not done in Iran thus far?
Sure. Yesterday's comments in the Oval Office really took me as a surprise, seemed like a reversal. Now, you mentioned the Abraham Lincoln has left the South China Sea, is headed towards the area of Central Command. Presumably that includes the Persian Gulf. Maybe within a couple of days, the president will have more options for military strikes than he did a couple of days ago. My colleague Noah Rothman a week ago noticed that we did not have a carrier group in the Middle East and wondered if that was going to become a headache. It's conceivable that it has. Trump, both in his interview with you a week ago, setting news, saying we're going to hit them hard if they kill their people. The Iranian mullahs and Ayatollah Khamenei have done nothing but kill their people since then. The estimates ranging from 2,500 to 20,000 people killed over the last week or so. And then on Truth Social, Trump goes on and says, help is on the way. MAGA, make Iran great again. Now, there are a lot of ways the president can hit the Iranians. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be airstrikes sent from, U.S. bases or an aircraft carrier. There's cyber. There's psychological operations. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could theoretically do this. But to make those kind of statements, it certainly indicated help is on the way, and we're going to hit them hard if they keep. And then he comes out and he starts saying the killing is over, which is not necessarily what it looked like for a long time. Sounded like he'd heard from the Iranians, probably through an intermediary, maybe the Qataris or something. And they said that, he mentions the executions are over. He keeps using the term killings and executions interchangeably. One of the figures who was, getting the most attention, they said they were not going to execute, at least for now. Like, I'm glad to hear that. But that's one guy in a, conflict that has already killed thousands, possibly tens of thousands of people. So I hope this is a feint. I hope that this is just the president trying to fake out the mullahs and make it sound like they've gotten off the hook. We're seeing statements from our Arab allies in the Gulf indicating that they think the moment of crisis is past. If the president says, help is on the way and we're going to hit these guys, and then doesn't do anything, this is going to be really bad. I think this is going to be remembered as an Afghanistan-style moment in which the Iranian regime, whether or not it collapses in the next couple months, their economic problems are not going away. It's
Correct.
Not like their currency is suddenly going to be valued again. They can suppress this uprising. They can suppress these protests through extreme violence. That's possible, right? But the problem is that once you do that, you're still there. And you look at things. Scott Bessent was on Newsmax last night. First of all, he explicitly refers to harming the protesters as a red line from President Trump. I'm sure your listeners, having good memories, are sitting there and thinking like, whoa, that's giving me bad memories. We use the term red line. That was Obama and Syria and the use of chemical weapons. The Trump administration prides itself on not being like the Obama administration and not failing to follow through once they draw these kinds of red lines. So it's conceivable this is just the president trying to fool them, trying to do a ruse. If a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, there has been no discernible U.S. effort against the regime for killing the protesters, then I get real nervous. Then I think that we've really lost a great deal of our credibility, and an opportunity to really topple this regime might be slipping through our fingers.
Jim, you answered the question. I wanted to know the time frame in which the president has to act, because I do believe the Iranian people heard help is on the way quite clearly. They heard take over your institutions. They heard MIGA. They read MIGA. They are cut off from the outside world, but there's ways for information to get in. I think they thought but there wasn't a time frame there. I'm more generous than you. I'm saying by March 15th, 2 months, because it takes a while to position assets, and the carrier group doesn't get there for 10 days, Jim. So it's, if you need the carriers, and you got to get Israel ready, because I think the mullahs will fire off everything they can if they come under attack. And you might want to, the term W used in the Oval Office with me once and a bunch of other talk show hosts was, we can disintermediate a lot of money. Isn't that a big word, disintermediate? It was a funny thing, but we could take their money.
Hugh, I've never seen you do Bush before. That's pretty darn good.
Well, that was a memorable, pretty big word for a W, huh? And I thought...
Disintermediate. We're not just going to mediate them. We're going to diss them in the disintermediate. They're going to feel insulted through the entire mediate. Right? So whatever channel they're on, they're going to feel dissed. That's what it means when we disintermediate them.
Well, it was funny, but he was talking about things we can do that we don't see. And I'm going to give 2 months for everyone to get together and figure it out. But you made a key point about the real is still worthless. And if you were going long on the real, you're hurt. What I want to ask you is, does what we saw this week justify, or should it justify in the minds of even Barack Obama and Ben Rhodes and John Kerry, that this regime would have used the nukes if they'd been able to build them? They're crazy. They'll kill people by the thousands.
Yes, and by the way, why are we ever putting more money into the hands of this regime? Look, the problems of the Iranian economy are not simply because of our sanctions, but our sanctions have been a factor in it. And the maximum pressure campaign that Trump has enacted since he returned to office is no doubt a factor. Wall Street Journal had a good article on this. There are real problems with corruption in the regime. There are real problems with the fact that, for obvious reasons, Russia can't help them out the way it used to. The Russian economy is in rough shape. But I'd also just point out, according to Bessent, everybody Iranian elite is trying to get their money out of the country as quickly as possible. There are the reports, according to a member of British Parliament, that you have planes full of gold flying from Tehran to Moscow. Now, if you're an Iranian elite, you only do this if you think there's a real chance that a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, by the end of the year, the Iranian regime is not in place, right? You shipping tons of gold out of the country, you don't do that on a whim. So the people who are presumably in the best position to know the condition of the Iranian regime are acting really nervous right now. That's why I think this is not just the same old show we've seen of protesters before. I think they really are hanging on by the edge of their fingernails right now.
It's also why I don't think it's over. Jim Garrity at National Review, thank you. Follow him on X at Jim Garrity. Listen to 3 Martini Lunch. Listen to the editors. Read his column in the Washington Post. Bracing hour, right? A bracing hour. Senator Shelley Moore Capito, it's not over. Seth Mandel, it's not over. Jim Garrity, it's not over. It's not over. Don't think that it's over. It's not over. We don't know how it's going to end. I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I don't think it's over. What I do think is you are almost certainly paying too much for your cell phone bill. Consumer Cellular is a great sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show, and you ought to find out if they should be your cell phone carrier. 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh, consumercellular.com/Hugh. Look at your phone bill and find out how much you are actually paying for your cell phone data. Get it out before you call 1-800-411-4454 so you can compare. When you call that, by the way, you hit one button. They have a menu with buttons. You press one for, you're in Alaska or something. I don't know what it is. But then you're talking to a real live human being in America. And their call centers are in America, and it takes about 20 minutes to switch, only 20 minutes to switch. You keep your number, keep your information, just pay less. And if you're over 50, it's especially something you should do. 1-800-411-4454 or consumercellular.com/you, because then you can get 2 lines of unlimited data for $60 a month. So call and find out how much you're spending and how much you could be saving. And don't forget to use my code HUGH, H-U-G-H. No matter what your age, no matter what plan you switch to with Consumer Cellular, you'll get the second month for free if you use my name, Hugh, or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. I am in the Relief Factor studio, so I want to close today's show by telling you I went up the implacable hill. I brag about it whenever I did it. Did it this morning. And beautiful day in Southern California. I was asked last night at an event I was speaking at, Republican donors, whether or not I was ever going to move back to California. I said, boy, on days like yesterday and today, it's really tempting. But then I look at what's going on around here. And a guy asked me, do you think it can get better? And I paused. I feel like the oncologist with bad news. No. But it's still a beautiful place to live. You can pay a big California tax if you want to. I just like to come visit in the winter and teach a semester here and there. And I like to go up the Relief Factor Implacable Hill. So call Relief Factor and try it. Nobody brought up Relief Factor to me last night. I never asked for people. So I wanted to see if, 2 nights ago, I gave a speech to Legatus down in Orange County, and a Relief Factor user came up and told me how much they liked it. Did not happen last night. Never make stuff up. But this is what a packet looks like when you get the 3-week starter packet. $19.95, less than $1 a day. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. You take 3 of those a day for the first week. Then you take 2 of these a day for the second week, and then you're on the once-a-day plan, and you'll feel great. And you'll be able to take on the implacable hills of your life, or the long beach runs in your life, or the biking, pedaling, weightlifting, whatever it is. Get rid of the minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. Get Relief Factor, 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website, relieffactor.com.